Hello again, Star Wars Unlimited humans. It's me again to talk about some of the new cards we've seen spoiled for Twilight of the Republic, the next set for Star Wars Unlimited, coming out in about a month's time. We're nearly there. First of all, yes, we've got another very large amount of cards to have a look at. It's been another week, but that is largely due to the fact that FFG put out a video showing some actual live gameplay of the starter deck. So we've got a lot of lower rarity cards, not stuff that's necessarily all that exciting, so we can go through a lot of that quite quickly. But if you want to see that video, I'll have the link down in the description below. Also worth pointing out that you can play with and against these decks on Force Table. So if you want to see what the play patterns look like with some of the new mechanics, you can already do that. I'll link that down in the description below as well. It's a nice little free way to play online against AI opponents. So before doing anything else, let's have a look at these new cards in particular, starting off with the new units. And most of these are sort of averagely costed, kind of okay units that don't really do much in terms of gameplay in Premiere, but there's a few things of note here. First of all, the ATTE Vanguard for the Republic, I think is going to make an okay draft card simply because it has Restore 3 on it. It's a restore value we rarely see, plus it's really hard to kill, and when you do, you get 2 Clone Trooper tokens, so, you know, it's doing a decent amount of stuff for a bit of a top-end card. It doesn't have any color requirement beyond being heroic, so that kind of makes it relevant enough in certain decks. I don't think it's a great card to unlock Coordinate or anything like that. I just think it's an okay statted card for draft. Same with the ETA 2 Light Interceptor. It's just got some okay stats. It's got Restore on it. And being at common as well means a lot of players just have access to it if they're, you know, playing your Republic Coordinate deck or just heroic decks in general. Probably not for Premiere though, we do have much more efficient versions of this kind of effect. Moving over to the Separatists, the B1 security team is a nice cheap Sentinel, and that probably makes it playable if we have any kind of Separatist yellow decks, if the exploit wants to be playing yellow. We're seeing a few pieces for that come up, so that makes it relevant enough. Droid Starfighter is relevant simply because it's a 1-drop. Yep, it has no color requirements beyond being villainous, and it is going to be important in those decks because they want to spam out as much units as possible. 1-drops are very important in those kinds of decks. It's a 1-2 with Saboteur in space as well, so, you know, it's got decent stats for what it is. And Subjugating Starfighter, a 4-resource 3/3 in space that has Ambush, and when played, if you have the initiative, create a Battle Droid token, so it's an okay rate on Ambush. It's a slightly less okay rate to get you multiple units, but notably it is doing both, and I think that might make it relevant in Premiere for those reasons. Otherwise, yes, very relevant in draft. Alright, just putting the non-unit cards up on the screen here. Now, we have a lot more interesting things to talk about here. In actual fact, I will actually go through all of these in a bit more detail. First of all, let's watch this old clip. Also a bit more information from another FFG stream. They showed off some of the new art from the upcoming set, like Ventress and Trench, and these 2 Clone Troopers jumping through a window. Now I'm going to guess right here what this is, because this art reminds me so much of the Magic card Raise the Alarm. I think it's going to be something very similar. I'm going to say it's Heroic Event 4 resources, Rapid Reinforcements, create 2 Clone Trooper tokens. That's what I reckon this is going to be. I'm calling it right now. See, I called it. 4 resource, create 2 Clone Trooper tokens. Now, this might be playable in Premiere simply because it offers a little bit of redundancy. We are now seeing multiple cards that offer you the ability to create 2 Clone Troopers or a Clone Trooper unit that gets you an extra 1 for 3 resources. So it is a bit expensive in terms of this effect, but we might just need it maybe as a 1 or 2 to make sure we have a lot of access to that effect within that deck. Otherwise, great for draft, obviously. Again, no color requirements beyond being heroic, so it's going to be important from that regard. Droid deployment, on the other hand, I think is fantastic and is going to be an absolute staple for your exploit decks. It is now the cheapest way in the game to get multiple units. 2 resource, 2 battle droid tokens. Fantastic. There is also the case for playing this in other decks. JJ on the Discord server pointed out might be interesting in your Palp decks. It gets you a bit more fodder to sacrifice your own units and activate his ability, which is not uninteresting. But ultimately, I think we're looking at our exploit decks. Turn 1 getting multiple units. I honestly think this is pretty big, both for draft and Premiere. The ability to get out really powerful exploit units. Man, turn 2 pretty consistently. This is really going to be an important piece for that deck. Moving on to the other cards we have here, Encouraging Leadership. It's a nice little Anthem style effect, gives all your units +1/+1. You know, okay for your coordinate decks, but I think ultimately in constructed play, you get this kind of effect just stapled onto some units like Clone Commander Cody and that kind of stuff. I think in most cases you're just going to want to play more better units than a card like this. That deck doesn't want to be spending too many turns not playing units. Maybe it's an interesting card in the exploit decks, offers a bit of a different strategy. Ultimately, it plays a bit awkwardly because those decks want to be defeating their own battle droids, so, you know, using a whole bunch of them and just using Encouraging Leadership to, you know, finish out the game with damage. Well, it offers a bit of, you know, a bit of a different game plan, so that's kind of cool. In Pursuit looks fantastic, especially in Separatist decks where you're guaranteed almost to have units that are worse than your opponents. Having yellow cards that are, you know, 0 cost. Being able to play a card when your opponent thinks you're completely tapped out and unable to is always great. We see this with cards like Bamboozle. And, yeah, just a random tapping card seems great. Merciless Contest. Now, this is interesting. It's an Edict-style effect in that you have to sacrifice one of your own units. It's symmetrical, though. It has no color requirements beyond just being villainous. We do have a one-sided effect already in the game in the Power of the Dark Side, which is blue and villainous. Same cost though, but only your opponent sacrifices the units. So I can understand why people might just say, well, that card's just better all the time, why would I just play that? But being able to sacrifice your own units actually might be relevant to some game strategies. Apart from the fact that, yes, now we have a redundant version of this effect. This means you're able to sacrifice units to turn on the abilities of like Newt Gunray or Wat Tambor, a leader we'll talk about in a second. You can also break the symmetry by having handy on-defeat triggers, you know, things that deal damage to your opponent's units or bases, or, you know, things that create battle droids, all that kind of stuff. We're seeing quite a few of those in the game right now. And I think for that reason, this will be better in some situations than the Power of the Dark Side. It is interesting that decks can now play both of these cards, which means you essentially have 6 copies of these sacrifice effects on your opponent's board. When you have that kind of critical mass of that kind of effect, you can just play it so frequently and consistently. It can be quite a pain for your opponent. We've got a couple of leader-focused upgrade cards. Ahsoka's Padawan Lightsaber is a +2/+0. Goes on any non-vehicle, and if you play it on Ahsoka, you may attack with a unit. Notably, not necessarily Ahsoka. So you can play this on her and attack with another unit. You know, it means you can play it on her and attack with Anakin Skywalker. You're not going down that turn efficiency. You're able to play an upgrade and attack with a unit within 1 turn cycle, which means you're more likely to get the initiative. And as the flaw of this card, you know, you're not able to get it on Ahsoka for whatever reason, 1 resource for a +2/+0 is fine in some situations. It's obviously not amazing, but not bad, not bad. Certainly a staple in any Ahsoka deck. Moving over to Grievous's Wheelbike, this is a bit of fun. 4 resource villainous card. While playing this upgrade on General Grievous, it costs 2 less to play, so it would cost 2 unless there's any other kind of resource altering effect. Attached to a non-vehicle unit, and attached unit gains Overwhelm and +3/+3. So again, the flaw in this is it's a 4 resource card that goes onto, you know, one of your ground units and makes them +3/+3 and Overwhelm. And that's not great again, but it's not a terrible flaw. On General Grievous, this is fantastic. A 2 resource +3/+3 and Overwhelm is just great. Certainly seems like a great way to push out some late game damage. I guess if you're going to build that janky Grievous unit deck with all the lightsabers, hey, you can give him 4 lightsabers and a wheelbike. That's a really cool image. Just spinning around with all the lightsabers. That's pretty cool. I guess I don't think that makes this deck playable. Hey, Ahsoka's lightsaber can go in that deck. There's a 1 cost upgrade that can be stacked onto General Grievous, and you can, you know, play your 4th lightsaber and then watch him get removed immediately. But in all seriousness, yes, this is great for a General Grievous leader deck. Really cool, fun stuff. Also the first vehicle upgrade we've seen. Don't know if we'll have any reason for stapling that trait on an upgrade in terms of mechanics within the game, but cool, good fun. Okay, with that out of the way, a quick shout out to all the content creators that helped bring us all the information for these new cards. Woo! Rolling Dice and Taking Names, TwinSunz, Outer Rim CCG, SWU Harvest, and Late Night Gaming. I'll put links for all of their spoilers, plus the FFG stream down in the description below. Alright, we'll finish up this video with the 3 leaders that have been spoiled in the last week, but let's go through the rest of the cards alphabetically. First of all, Ahsoka Tano. Always ready for trouble, a 3-resource cunning heroic 3/4 Force Jedi Republic ground unit. While you control fewer units than an opponent, including this unit gains ambush and action for 2 resources. Return this unit and each upgrade to her owner's hands. The first thing I think about with a card like this is playing it in like a Quinlan Vos deck. By the way, this card was spoiled only shortly after Quinlan Vos was announced, and FFG seems to be making a habit of making sure that leaders and, you know, the unit that goes with that leader is spoiled nice and close together. Otherwise, in terms of the shell she goes into, yeah, specifically decks that want to play less units than your opponents. Obviously, it's a fun little answer for this set in particular, which is all about unit spam. But, you know, apart from that, it's got some good stuff. The fact that she returns her upgrades as well is great, meaning, you know, you can stick on lightsabers and all that kind of stuff, her lightsaber included. Little fun interaction there. You actually get to re-trigger the on-play trigger of her lightsaber. Little awkward that you have to have other units to make that work when, you know, she wants to specifically only be played when you have less units than your opponent. Pretty fun nonetheless. A nice, interesting card. An ambusher that can return herself to her hand. Really cool. Flavor-wise, though, kind of weird because this reminds me of, you know, what she was doing when she was on screen in The Mandalorian. You know, jumping in and out of the shadows, doing her little ambushy thing. That's the first thing I think about, but this is Ahsoka as she was being a Padawan, Force Jedi Republic traits. Also, you know, flavor-wise, with the card, she works better alone, which again implies she wasn't working for the Republic. I don't know, just kind of a weird mismatch there, but a cool card nonetheless. Brain Invaders is a 4-cost card with no aspect, a 2/4 fringe ground unit. Each leader loses all abilities except for epic actions and can't gain abilities. This to me seems like a really powerful hate piece. Being able to switch off leader abilities. I guess you got to be mindful of the kind of abilities you might be switching off on your own leaders. Maybe it's relegated to the sideboard because that's just too painful in too many decks, but man, there are some great situations. Like, if you can stop Palp from stealing one of your units by playing this just before he's about to come out, that seems fantastic. Bit of a tempo hit. It's a 4-cost 2/4. Just got to remember that it's not the greatest hate piece from that regard. You are sort of paying for a low value unit in order to get access to that. But yeah, just really, really powerful. Also, if you're playing Kylo Ren, well, he has no downside for losing his ability. He is just a 5/4 permanently while you have this card out, which is cool. I think that means Kylo probably does want to play this, but I don't think you lean into making sure you find this card every time in order to deploy Kylo. But yeah, definitely a card you're going to play in your Kylo Ren decks for sure. Also, any leader that relies on their abilities to make their combat stats okay, like Cad Bane has Raid 2 for example, this just turns him into a 2/8, which is a terrible rate on his stats. Yeah, this is going to do a lot of really annoying stuff. Moving over to Count Dooku, this is an 8-cost aggressive villainous 6/6 Force Separatist Sith ground unit. Exploit 2, Overwhelm, and when played, for each unit you exploited while playing this card, you may deal damage to an enemy unit equal to the power of the exploited unit. Now, people seem to be a little bit confused on this one. Basically, if you exploited one unit, you take the power of the unit that you had to sacrifice in order to play Count Dooku and deal that to one of your opponent's units. If you sacrifice 2 of your own units, one by one, you take the power of those units. Say you defeated a battle droid token and a Stap Rider, you would deal 1 damage to an enemy unit, and then you would deal 5 damage to an enemy unit. Those are separate effects. From the way I read this card, it should be able to work either on the same enemy unit or 2 different enemy units. It's kind of dictating that those become 2 different events. You know, the term for each means it's going to be 2 separate triggers, although dealt simultaneously because it's all within the same ability. Okay, with that out of the way, this card looks fantastic. Even if you're only exploiting 1 unit, it's a 6-cost 6/6 Overwhelm, and that's still great. Plus, you're just nugging one of your opponent's units at that point. If you're favorably exploiting 2, this just seems absurdly powerful. Relevant traits as well. You know, that means you're able to play him in a deck that, you know, wants villainous force stuff like your Force Choke, Lightning, Fallen Lightsaber, all those kind of cards. He's a Separatist as well, so he works in those decks. I can just see him working in so much kind of stuff. He could work okay in Palp, although Palp's already, you know, sacrificing his own units. He kind of works okay with his own leader as well. Yes, I fully understand that exploit shouldn't stack. At the same time, this is a great little payoff. Look, even if you're exploiting battle droid, you're still dealing 1 to 2 separate units, and that's still great because the stats are still solid anyway. It even goes okay in a Maul deck, and the reason I say that, and yes, I know Maul gives all of his units Overwhelm, and he's already got Overwhelm, so Nick, that's terrible, what are you talking about? Maul already wants to be playing cards with lots of power, like your Death Star Stormtroopers and your Stap Riders and that kind of stuff. Those pair fantastically with Count Dooku. The second those units have outlived their usefulness, just fling them at your opponent's units. Fantastic. Really like this card. Really, really powerful. Moving over to, oh, here we go, Jar Jar Binks. Now, this is a fun one. By the way, apologies for not having a high-quality image of Jar Jar or Ahsoka. These were taken at Spiel. We don't seem to have high-res version of these cards uploaded just yet, but thank you to Star Wars Unlimited database for at least getting the cards in the right aspect ratio and cropping it nicely for the website. That makes this a little bit easier. A 2-cost double cunning 2/3 Gungan ground unit. On attack, deal 2 damage to a random unit or base. Oh, this is great. This is so good. Like, it really does capture the clumsiness of this character. I know some people are down on this because they think it's, you know, it's turning the character into a joke. Look, realistically, the character kind of is a joke. Like, not throwing any shade at the creative forces behind this, especially the actor, Ahmed Best. I know he suffered a lot of abuse because of the bullying he got after episode 1. You know, we can be mature enough to appreciate that the character is rather clownish without, you know, just dogpiling on that. That kind of sucks that whole thing happened. In terms of this card, though, this is actually really powerful. Like a 2-resource 2/3 that deals to something when it attacks. Yeah, I know it can deal damage to himself, but he'll survive 1 hit. He has 3 health. You know, it sucks when it hits your own base, obviously, but, you know, just randomly hitting one of your opponent's units or bases is really good. Like, this is really above curve in terms of its efficiency. In terms of playing this in a Premier deck, I'm not sure, because double yellow doesn't have access to grit. You know, I'm not really sure if it has access to anything which gets a benefit from being damaged. Answer in the comments if I've missed something here. I don't know. I kind of want to try it though. Like, I'm playing around with the double yellow Han deck at the moment. I'm going to just chuck a couple of copies in Jar Jar in and see what happens. This could be a lot of fun, actually. I quite like this card. Morgan Elsbeth is a 4-cost Vigilant Villainous 3/6 Force Imperial Official ground unit. She has Restore 1, and on attack you may defeat another friendly unit. If you do, draw a card. And the more I look at this card, the more I like it. It's just doing a lot of stuff that these decks are going to want. Being able to defeat friendly units is oddly becoming upside in some of these decks. Being blue means, you know, you can definitely play her in your new Gunray decks, and he likes to see units being defeated. Wat Tambor, which we're going to have a look at in a second, again. Yeah, it's just doing a lot of cool stuff here and being able to get a bit of card advantage. Sticking Restore on this is great. It's really doing what blue wants to be doing. There's not really much to say here. It's a good engine for this kind of colour. Also, if there is a really good blue exploit deck, it doesn't feel too bad to have a bit of redundancy in terms of what you're doing with all your battle droids. Because there might be situations where you can't use them all up in terms of resources. You might attack with all of them, you might exploit something smallish, and hey, you've got a few left over. This right here is a great use for those tokens. In a situation where you're just playing her as a 3/6 for 4, and you're swinging in with Restore 1 and just, you know, taking some big hits with a nice chunk of health, that also seems okay. Like, I like the versatility of that kind of effect. Padmé Amidala is a 2-cost Cunning Heroic 1/4 Naboo Republic Official ground unit. And she has Coordinate. On attack, give an enemy unit -3, -0 for this phase. And this is doing quite a lot. Like, this cost for a 1/4 with that effect is great. You know, Coordinate's been stuck on this to temper the effect, make sure it's not too consistent. And honestly, I think that's okay. If there is a yellow Coordinate deck, and I'm sort of skeptical if there is going to be, this seems like a pretty solid card for that. Being a Naboo card, like, we don't really have a payoff for Naboo at the moment. Interesting to point out as well, Jar Jar that we just looked at is a Gungan and not a Naboo. Maybe we'll get like a boss NAS leader that cares about both Naboo and Gungans, and he has like a, you know, let's be friends and let's have one of each unit and it makes them all more powerful or something like that. So maybe that deck wants this kind of thing. I don't know, I'm just spitballing ideas here. but certainly an efficient effect if we can pull off the yellow coordinate deck. In a non-coordinate focused deck, still might be okay. Yellow can spit out a lot of units when it has to, depending on the deck archetype. And look, even in those decks, it's a 1-4 for 2. That's still a great rate, so maybe it's okay when it's not consistently being turned on. But look, that ability is fantastic. Just being able to reduce the power of your opponent's units turn after turn with that repeatable effect is fantastic. Republic Defense Carrier is an 11 cost command heroic 6/7 Republic vehicle capital ship space unit. This unit costs 1 less to play for each unit controlled by the opponent who controls the most units. It also has Sentinel. Now, just to clear up that first sentence, it might seem a bit complicated and wordy, but that's mainly to balance it out for TwinSunz. Basically, for draft and premiere and sealed or whatever, 1v1, it costs 1 less for each unit that your opponent controls. The only reason it's worded like this, so in a game of TwinSunz, it's not 1 less for the combined amount of all your opponent's units. That might make it way too cheap too consistently, so that makes sense. So only the amount the opponent with the most controls. Apart from that, it might make a decent little sideboard card. It's just a big chonky Sentinel in space. Although against like Exploit and Coordinate, do they really have a decent amount of haymakers in space? Is it like a 6/7 Sentinel in space going to be good enough? Look, I guess if it becomes cheap enough, being a 6/7 in space is good enough just to be a nice piece that can close out a game. So that's pretty cool. I don't know what particular deck wants this kind of effect. Might be able to sideboard this pretty consistently. It really depends on the state of the meta. I do predict that we are going to see, particularly with Exploit, a lot of heavy unit spam, so I think this is going to be an okay card for sure. Maybe not main boardable though, that's the only thing. Okay, let's move over to Satine Kryze. Actually, we'll have a look at Duchess's Champion as well, because these two cards do kind of go together. Satine is a 4-cost Vigilant Heroic 0/6 Mandalorian official ground unit. Each unit, including enemy units, gains action, exhaust, discard cards from an opponent's deck equal to half this unit's remaining HP, rounded up. And Duchess's Champion is a 4-cost double Vigilant 1/8 Mandalorian ground unit. And while an opponent controls 3 or more units, this unit gains Sentinel. So it's interesting because we have kind of a new game strategy for your blue-white decks. And I'm kind of on the fence whether it's sort of powerful enough to close out games. It might be a bit of a double-edged sword, the fact that it does let your opponent do it too, but I guess unless they're really dedicating their units to this kind of strategy, you're probably going to mill them out faster than they mill you out. Sorry for the non-Magic players, mill means discard cards from your opponent's deck. Yeah, look, it's interesting potentially in the Obi-Wan deck. Makes sense. It's Satine and Obi-Wan. You know, that's a bit of a thing in the Clone Wars if you haven't seen that. Obi-Wan being able to heal these units with, you know, massive hit point stats means you can pretty consistently use this ability while they have a lot of remaining HP, so it might be good. Just bear in mind though, it is a unit card, it's not on a leader, which means you can't always rely in having access to this effect. So I think even in that Obi-Wan deck, you do need a secondary game strategy. And my mind always goes to cards like Luke Skywalker as a unit and think, well, isn't it just better if this deck's playing those kind of haymakers instead of this kind of thing? Yeah, look, I'm not too sure. It also does pair interestingly with Yoda, which again we'll talk about in a second. Yoda has removal on a stick as his deploy ability, so that might be good. Yeah, I'm really curious about these. I think we're ultimately just going to have to wait and see in terms of what the meta does to see if this kind of effect is powerful enough. Duchess's Champion obviously does rely on your opponent having 3 units. You know, it's not a difficult effect. I kind of do think 4 resources double Vigilant, couldn't it just have Sentinel? Was that too much to ask? Yeah, I don't know, 8 HP is a lot. Like, I just feel like it just could have gotten Sentinel at that kind of cost, and you know, being double Vigilant means, you know, it's a pretty big cost to have to play a card like this. And it is a pretty big piece in terms of making sure Satine works. So, I don't know. We'll see what happens with that kind of effect. Very curious to see whether that's viable or not. Alright, and lastly we have Unlimited Power, a 6-cost double red force event. Deal 4 damage to a unit, 3 damage to a second unit, 2 damage to a third unit, and 1 damage to a fourth unit. And all that damage is resolved simultaneously. So this is an extremely powerful one-sided board wipe. Yes, you have to be in double color. Again, you know, double color. That's the kind of thing it should be giving you. It is interesting though in terms of being double red. Most double red cards sort of lean into really heavy aggression, wanting to close out the game as fast as possible. This is a rather expensive removal piece, so I'm not kind of sure what shell it wants to go into. It's splashy. It's certainly a legendary card. I'm not questioning that for a second. You know, being a force card, I guess we'll see. We haven't seen the Palpatine unit for this set. I'm sure there's going to be a Palpatine unit for this set. I wouldn't be surprised if that sort of, played into what he wanted to do. Yeah, so we'll see if this kind of card has a home. As it stands, playing this in double red Sabine or Kylo or any other kind of hyper-aggressive strategy, I just don't think those decks really want this kind of effect. Not now, anyway. Okay, moving over to these new leaders and their supporting cast. Starting off with Wat Tambor. He's in the command and villainous aspects. He has action, exhaust. If a friendly unit was defeated this phase, give a unit +2/+2. He deploys at 5 resources, and he is a 3/6 Separatist official ground unit. On attack, if a friendly unit was defeated this turn, you may give another unit +2/+2 for this phase. Really aggressive stat line. 3/6 on a 5-drop is great, and attaching no resource cost to that ability on the leader side I think is fantastic as well. It's kind of another exploit payoff. Definitely must be playing battle droids. Doesn't hurt to give battle droids +2/+2. It turns them into 3/3s. But ultimately, I think, we're looking at the more aggressive cards. If we have some good, on defeat triggers that we're seeing a whole bunch of, I think the obvious choice is pairing this with red, but definitely cases for yellow or blue as well. Also, in terms of cards to support this, we have Poggle the Lesser, a 2-cost command villainous aspect, 1/4 Separatist official ground unit. When you play another unit, you may exhaust this unit. If you do, create a battle droid, a great little engine. And also Admiral Trench, a 7-cost command villainous aspect, 5/5 Separatist official ground unit, exploit 1. And when played, return up to 3 units that were defeated this phase from your discard pile to your hand. So yeah, if you're playing a decent amount of cards that have good on-defeat triggers, like your little cheap battle droids that, ping damage across or all that kind of fun stuff, you might get the opportunity to get up to 3 of them. Now, he has exploit 1, which means you immediately get to sacrifice something and get it back. Just remember this plays very poorly with tokens because you can't get token back once they've been defeated. They don't go into the discard pile, they just leave play and they just leave the game instantly. They are not allowed to change zone. Look, I don't think it means you don't play any battle droids in a deck with Admiral Trench. But just do bear in mind there is that bit of downside. Also, Poggle the Lesser, a repeatable battle droid engine. This is a staple in any exploit deck. It's a great turn 1 play. It means you can play like this on turn 1. You can play your battle droid escort on turn 2. And suddenly you have 4 units in play, which means on that turn or the next turn, you can easily exploit out something big. So a great little engine and really solid in Wat Tambor. You have something that can efficiently churn out your 1/1 tokens that can, die in combat or be sacrificed to exploit effects, and you can get your +2/+2 out pretty consistently. And again, those are not bad options to receive the +2/+2 as well. He's got 4 health, so it takes a bit of getting through. And look, once your opponent gets through him, guess what? You had a unit that got defeated. You can activate Wat Tambor when that happens. Great! In terms of your more powerful mid-range exploit decks, I still think Count Dooku is going to be the better option. But sort of leaning into the more aggressive style play. I like Wat Tambor. This is an interesting looking card. Okay, let's move on to Pre Vizsla. This one looks sick. Pre Vizsla is a aggressive villainous aspect leader. Action, 1 and exhaust. Deal damage to your unit equal to the number of cards you've drawn this phase. He deploys at 5. He is a 4/6 Mandalorian Trooper ground unit. While you have 3 or more cards in your hand, this unit gains Saboteur. While you have 6 or more cards in your hand, this unit gains +2/+0, giving you base stats of a 6/6 Saboteur. Also in the supporting cast, we have Bo-Katan Kryze, a 2-cost aggressive villainous 2/3 Mandalorian Trooper ground unit. While you control another Mandalorian unit, she gains Overwhelm and Saboteur. And while you control another Trooper unit, this unit gains +1/+0. So if you have a Mandalorian Trooper out, well, she's a 3/3 Overwhelmed Saboteur. And I'm really excited for both of these cards. Just on a selfish note, I like to play Bo-Katan currently in Premiere. Really fun, awesome leader. I feel like Mandalorians in general, they're kind of close to getting there in terms of the critical mass of cards they need. That deck, I feel, ultimately has to play a few bad units to make it work. Bad in terms of, units that you play on turn 1 or 2 that are not the best thing you could be doing. They're not, the best rate on the kind of effects they want. But you play them because you need a critical mass of Mandalorians. Hopefully, fingers crossed, there's about 100 more cards to reveal. We get some non-heroic, non-villainous Mandalorians. Hopefully a 1-drop. This deck really needs a 1-drop. On a less selfish note, on the villainous side of things, we do have a payoff for Mandalorians and villainous now as well. There might be a shell to build like Pre-Vizsla with a Darksaber and all that kind of fun stuff. Right now I'm feeling like he's the more powerful leader compared to something like Gar Saxon, but look, if the shell exists, they are different colours, they can lean into different strategies. The aggressive Pre-Vizsla Mandalorian deck, I'm really hoping the pieces for that come together. This deck playing a Darksaber, just a bunch of incidental card advantage things. Maybe we get a few Mandalorians that can help you draw cards in certain ways, or I don't know, maybe I'm being too hopeful, maybe it won't come together. As it stands, the Mandalorian payoffs really do lean heavily into heroic, with things like the Armourer, Clan Ren, Rescuer, Razor Crest, you know, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, another really fun shell for the Darksaber I'm down for. In terms of other things we can be doing with Pre-Vizsla, just playing powerful red cards with card advantage seems really good. It does open the door to a lot of really janky cards. I Am Your Father, weirdly, is a fantastic card in this deck. You're probably always going to be dealing 7 to a unit, but that's okay, I guess. If your opponent lets you draw 3, well, you can start hitting them with a massive leader unit, so that's okay. We can maybe start to look at cards like No Bargain. I don't think there's a great rate on this card in general, but look, any kind of card that can replace itself seems okay. Aggression, if you're playing double red, means you can deal 4 to a unit, draw a card. So cards like this that replace themselves are really good in this deck because it means you're not going down on cards. Also, this kind of explains Shadow Collective Camp. Okay, I understand what's going on here. The fact that Pre-Vizsla is drawing you a card when he deploys is actually fantastic. It really does raise the odds that he at least gets his first ability and becomes a Saboteur immediately. Look, in terms of what's going on with the leaders so far, I don't think Pre-Vizsla is necessarily the best thing going on. I find him personally one of the more exciting leaders. Right now, I still like Dooku more than Rex, probably the best in terms of what we've seen so far. But really cool nonetheless. Yeah, this is dope. This is dope. I really want to play around with this card. All right, one more leader to have a look at. This is Yoda. Vigilance and Heroic. Action, Exhaust. If a unit left play this phase, draw a card. Then put a card from your hand on the top or bottom of your deck. He deploys at 7, and he becomes a 4/9 Force Jedi Republic ground unit with Restore 2. And when deployed, you may discard a card from your deck. If you do, defeat an enemy non-leader unit that costs the same or less than the discarded card. So there's some really fun things going on here. First of all, when deployed, being able to remove a unit is no joke. Really powerful. Yes, he does deploy at 7, and that is later than most units get to, but he does have a great stat line. He's got Restore, so he's able to stall out the game. You know, I gotta say, I'm usually really bad at evaluating your blue-white leaders. You know, I never really thought much of Rey when I first saw her, and she's just absolutely no joke in the meta right now. Yeah, this alongside Obi-Wan. I'm not sure which one does better. He does have the larger stats in terms of HP, so he might be the better option if you want to try and build that Satine Kryze deck. You know, we don't really have the pieces to build the Wookiee deck just yet. But when we do, this might be an okay thing to go alongside them. He's just, a lot of those cards just get access to things like Sentinel. They're already playing around with damage and stuff, and having another sort of big chunky restorer that can remove one really problematic unit might be enough to sort of make that deck really cohesive. In terms of being able to set up that secondary ability where you look at the top card of your deck, and if it costs enough, you can destroy one of your opponent's units. Obviously, yes, when you get to 7 resources, you can use the front end ability on the same turn to set up the when deployed ability. We can also be playing around with a few interesting cards like R2-D2 and C-3PO. These are cards that help you look at the top of your deck, manipulate it. They do sort of help out Yoda a little bit more as well, so probably a pretty solid staple in this kind of deck as well. Yeah, this is a lot of fun. Like, I don't know if it's powerful enough to be a good leader, especially with 7 resources being the deploy cost. But it's definitely doing some pretty cool stuff, and I think with the right pieces this can be really consistent. It'll be interesting to see what, in terms of blue-white leaders, becomes more dominant in the meta after this set comes out. And with that, we are all caught up with these new cards. Thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget to jump on the Discord. Link down in the description. You do not have to give me anything on Patreon. Just come hang out. Chat all things X-Wing and Star Wars Unlimited. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Ring that bell and do all the things that make the YouTube algorithm happy with me. Hey, I see a lot of unique people watching these videos, but I don't seem to have gotten a lot of new subscribers from these videos. I'm really happy that we are getting a bit of a core audience for these Star Wars Unlimited videos, but please, if you are one of these people, subscribe to the channel. We're going to be doing way more of this, and I need as many of you as along for the ride to make sure that we have enough support to keep this going. So thank you all for that, thank you for the views, and I'll catch you all in the next video.